I remember the first time I saw the crystal towers of Valor Prime. Twin suns glinting off those impossible structures that seemed to defy gravity itself. One red one, golden casting dual shadows across the shimmering metropolis that stretched to the horizon. As a human, I was supposed to be impressed, maybe even intimidated. I was neither. After 5 years as a Special Forces operative for Earth's Unified Command, it took more than pretty architecture to make me flinch. The Valari had designed everything to intimidate us, lesser species. The towering spires, the atmospheric modulation that made every non-Valari's lungs work just a little harder, the disdainful glances from the locals with their iridescent skin and fluid movements. The message was clear: you are visitors here tolerated, but never equals. My name is Captain Ethan Vance, and this is how I became the most wanted man in 2-star systems. I'd arrived on Valor Prime 3 years earlier as part of the cultural exchange program, diplomatic speak for Earth, sending its best soldiers to serve the Valari Empire in exchange for limited access to their advanced technology. Real one-sided arrangement, if you ask me. Earth needed the Valari's gravity manipulation tech and quantum processors. The Valari, they just enjoyed having humans jump through hoops. None of us exchange officers expected to rise through the ranks. We were glorified props in their diplomatic theater. So when I became the first human to earn a spot in the Royal Guardian Corps, it raised eyebrows across species lines. Not because I was exceptional, though I like to think I am, but because the Valari simply didn't promote outsiders. Ever. It started with a summons. King Zephyrus Valus himself requested my presence in the royal chambers. As the only human to ever serve in the Royal Guardian Corps, I'd earned something of a reputation among the Valari. Apparently, I'd caught the king's attention. The throne room itself was another display of Valari superiority, ceilings so high they disappeared into mist walls that seemed to shift with your mood, and guards with ceremonial weapons that could still cut a man in half with minimal effort. The aristocracy lined the walls, their skins showing varying degrees of luminescence depending on their proximity to royal blood. Pure-blooded Valari nobles glowed like living constellations. "Captain Vance," King Zephyros's voice echoed through the chamber as I knelt before him. "Stupid protocol. Your service to our world has been exceptional for a human." I kept my eyes down, my jaw clenched. "Thank you, Your Majesty. 3 years in our service, and not once have you requested leave to return to Earth. Your dedication is noteworthy." The king's voice carried that particular Valari inflection, musical, but with an edge of condescension that made you feel like a pet being praised for not soiling the carpet. "I take my duties seriously, Your Majesty." "Indeed." The king paused, and I could feel hundreds of Valari eyes boring into me. Such loyalty deserves a reward. There was something in his tone, smug, calculating. "I have decided to grant you my daughter, Princess Selene." My head snapped up before I could stop myself. "Your daughter, sir?" A ripple of whispers spread through the court. The king's lips curled into what passed for a smile among the Valari. "Indeed, she is unfortunately barren, a disappointment to our bloodline. But for a human, perhaps a fitting match." And there she was, stepping from behind her father's throne. Princess Selene Valus. Her skin shimmered with the subtle iridescence of all Valari, but less intensely than her father's, a visual reminder of her defect. Her hair was not the typical silver of royal Valari, but a deeper, almost blue-black, that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. But it was her eyes that caught me, deep violet, like earth twilight, and filled with something I recognized immediately. Something almost human. Defiance. "Father," she said, voice tight but musical. "How generous of you to give me away like a trinket." The court fell silent. Questioning the king even subtly wasn't done in Valari society. I watched as Zephyros's luminescence flared briefly anger, though his face remained impassive. "Your gratitude overwhelms me, daughter," he replied coolly. "Captain Vance, do you accept this honor?" I stood there, acutely aware that this wasn't a question I could refuse. The political implications were spinning through my head. Being gifted a royal princess, Barren or not, was unprecedented. What game was Zephyros playing? Was this some elaborate humiliation for us both? But looking at Selene, seeing that barely contained rebellion in her eyes, I made a decision that would alter the fate of 2 species. "I am humbled by your generosity. Your Majesty, I accept." The palace guards escorted us to adjacent chambers in the East Wing, far from the royal family's quarters, I noted. The awkwardness was suffocating. Once we were alone, I expected her to scream to rage at being paired with a lesser species. Instead, she started laughing. Not polite, courtly laughter, but deep, genuine amusement that made her luminescence pulse like a heartbeat. "Well, Captain," she said, those strange violet eyes glinting, "it seems we're both pawns in my father's game." Also, I couldn't help but smile. "Seems that way, Princess." "Please." She stepped closer and I caught her scent, something like ozone and wildflowers. "Call me Celine." That night we talked for hours. Not as human and Valari, but as two people caught in the same trap. She told me how her father had isolated her after the royal physicians declared her barren, how she'd been shut out of succession discussions, reduced to a political bargaining chip. "Do you know what they call me behind my back?" she asked, sitting cross-legged on a floating cushion. "The dull star, because my luminescence never fully developed." She held out her arm, the subtle glow beneath her skin pulsing gently. "A physical manifestation of my failure as a Valari royal." "I think it's beautiful," I said, surprising myself with my honesty. "Less overwhelming than the full royal glow." She smiled and it transformed her face. "I've watched you, you know," she said suddenly. "During your guard rotations, you're different from the others. You actually see beyond species." "Not hard when you're treated as lesser everywhere you go," I admitted. "Makes you look for the person beneath the exterior." "Is that what you're doing now? Looking for the person beneath my exterior?" There was a teasing note in her voice, but also genuine curiosity. I found myself drawn to her, not just her otherworldly beauty, but her mind, her spirit. There was a strength in her that reflected my own. "I'm finding her," I replied softly. Over the next few weeks, our arranged partnership evolved into something neither of us expected. The palace staff watched with a mixture of disgust and fascination as we took meals together, walked the crystal gardens, discussed everything from Earth philosophy to Valari quantum theory. What they didn't see were our nights together, not romantic at first, but conspiratorial. Celine knew more about Valari politics than anyone suspected, having spent her years of isolation studying rather than wallowing. And I had tactical knowledge that complemented her strategic mind. "What if," I suggested carefully one night, as we sat on her balcony watching the twin moons rise, "we use this arrangement to our advantage?" She turned to me, luminescence brightening with interest. "How so, Barren?" "Your father thinks he's sidelined us both, expects us to live quietly in this corner of the palace out of sight and mind." "But," she prompted, "but what if we became more than he bargained for?" I leaned closer. "There are progressive factions among both humans and Valari who believe in genuine cooperation between our species. Not this puppet show we've been putting on." Her eyes widened. "You're talking about politics, Captain Vance." "I'm talking about change, Princess Celine." She looked at me for a long moment, then slowly reached out and took my hand, the first time she'd initiated physical contact. Where our skin met, her luminescence seemed to intensify. "Perhaps," she said softly, "we should start with something simpler." Our first kiss bridged more than physical distance. Her lips carried a gentle electric charge, a characteristic of Valari physiology that sent currents dancing across my skin. When we parted, both breathless, I noticed something remarkable. Where my hand still touched hers, my own skin had taken on a faint glow, as if her luminescence had somehow transferred to me. We both stared at the phenomenon in wonder. "That's not possible," she whispered, but it was just the beginning of impossible. 6 months later, the truly impossible happened. Celine was pregnant. It started with subtle changes, her luminescence becoming more vibrant, more controlled. Then physical symptoms that confused her handmaidens, who had never seen a pregnant Valari royal before. The royal family used artificial gestation chambers for optimal genetic outcomes. When the royal physician confirmed it, we were both stunned into silence. Interspecies pregnancy wasn't just rare, it was supposed to be genetically impossible. How? I finally managed to ask as we sat alone in our chambers. Celine placed a hand on her still flat stomach, her skin glowing more brightly than I'd ever seen. "I don't know, but I feel complete, Ethan. For the first time in my life." We knew we needed to plan carefully. The Valari aristocracy would never accept a half-human child, especially one with royal blood. We had 6 months at most before Celine's condition became impossible to hide. We made contact with sympathizers, prepared escape routes, secured resources, all while maintaining the facade of the harmless Barren princess and her human pet. But we weren't as discreet as we thought. I'll never forget the look on King Zephyros's face when he burst into our chambers, a contingent of royal guards behind him. Pure, unfiltered rage that made his entire body illuminate like a dying star. The light was so intense that several human servants collapsed their retinas, seared by the king's fury. "What abomination is this?" he roared, pointing at Celine's swollen belly now visible beneath her flowing gown. "You were declared barren by the royal physicians." Celine stood tall, one hand protectively over her stomach. "They lied, father. On your orders, I suspect." The king's face contorted his luminescence, turning a dangerous crimson. "How dare you guards arrest them both this? My mongrel child cannot be allowed to exist." I didn't think I reacted. The neural implant at the base of my skull activated with a thought, sending the signal to the power armor I kept hidden in a compartment beneath our bed. It unfolded and assembled around my body in seconds, the battle-scarred plates sliding into place with practiced precision. The first guard who approached went flying across the room, his ceremonial armor no match for Earth military tech. "Celine," I shouted, deflecting energy blasts from the other guards. "The emergency protocols we discussed." Now, she was already moving tapping commands into her wrist consoles. The whole. Throughout the palace, systems began to fail: security doors, surveillance networks, atmospheric regulators, all part of the contingency plan we'd prepared just in case. "The atmospheric docks," she said, grabbing a small bag we'd kept packed. "We need to reach the eclipse." Fighting our way through the palace was like navigating a collapsing star system. Alarms blaring, guards converging from every direction. But we'd studied the layouts, memorized the blind spots. And honestly, Valari guards weren't prepared for Earth combat techniques. Too formal, too predictable. I slammed another guard into a crystal pillar, using my armor's enhanced strength. This way, I called to Celine, who was using her access codes to seal doorways behind us. "The outer ring is in lockdown," she called back, her pregnancy not slowing her down as much as I'd feared. "We need to go through the ceremonial gardens." The gardens were beautiful but dangerous, genetically engineered plants with defensive capabilities. As we entered the massive biodome, I activated my armor's environmental shield. "Stay close to me," I told Celine. "I've got a better idea." She placed her hand against a control panel, her royal DNA granting access even as alarms blared around us. "Biological defense protocol activate. Non-royal entities designated as threats." The garden came alive, flowering vines whipping out to entangle pursuing guards, luminescent pollen clouds disorienting them, massive leaves forming barriers. I stared at Celine in amazement. "You never mentioned you could do that." She gave me a grim smile. "There are many things about Valari royalty that aren't in the official briefings, Captain." We pushed forward, the garden actively helping us while hindering our pursuers. Ahead, I could see the atmospheric docks, and with them, our chance at freedom. As we burst onto the docking platform, the twin suns blinding after the garden's artificial light, Celine grabbed my arm. "Then there's something you need to know." She paused, catching her breath, her free hand supporting her stomach. I wasn't truly barren. The royal physicians lied to make me politically irrelevant to keep me controlled. Why would they? Because she cut me off, her eyes intense. "They discovered I have a genetic anomaly, one that makes me compatible with human DNA. They feared what it could mean for the purity of the royal bloodline." The implications hit me like a gravity wave. Our child wasn't just a miracle, it was a revolution waiting to happen. "They've been lying to both our species," she continued, her voice rising with the conviction. "Humans and Valari aren't as genetically different as we've been told. The compatibility is rare but real. My father's regime has suppressed this knowledge for generations." Behind us, we could hear reinforcements breaking through the garden's defenses. We didn't have much time. "We need to move," I said, scanning the docks. And there it was, my secret project hidden in plain sight among the royal shuttles. The Eclipse, a hybrid stealth ship I'd been modifying in secret for months, using components smuggled with the help of sympathetic engineers. From the outside, it looked like a standard Valari atmospheric transport. Inside was a different story. As royal guards flooded the platform, I fired up the engines, Selena's hands flying over the navigation console with practiced precision. The benefit of all those late nights, it studying ship schematics together. They're locking down the atmospheric gates, she warned, pointing to the massive crystal barriers beginning to close above the docking bay. I grinned despite everything. Good thing this isn't a standard Valari design then. I punched the accelerator, and the Eclipse responded with power no ordinary transport should possess. We shot upward, weaving between closing sections of the atmospheric barrier. "They're not going to make it," a guard's voice came through on the comms we'd hacked. "Seal the final gate. The last barrier was closing too quickly." I pushed the engines beyond safety limits, the ship shuddering around us. The Eclipse shot through the closing gate's shield, scraping against crystal with a sound that still haunts my nightmares. A jagged piece of the barrier tore through our port stabilizer, sending us into a spiral that I barely managed to correct. But we were out. Free of the palace, free of Valar Prime's atmosphere. For about 30 seconds, 3 royal warships appeared on our sensors, weapons charged. These weren't ceremonial vessels. They were hunters designed to outrun and outgun anything that challenged the Empire's authority. "Ethan," Celine's voice was steady, but I could hear the fear beneath it. "They're targeting our engines." We were good, but not that good. Not with damaged stabilizers and atmospheric hull integrity compromised. And then, like some cosmic joke, our communication system crackled to life. "Attention, fugitive vessel," came a gruff human voice. "This is General Orion Kane of the Independent Terran Fleet. Looks like you could use an exit strategy." I exchanged a look with Celine. General Kane was a legend, a former Earth commander who'd gone independent after disagreeing with Earth's appeasement policies toward the Valari Empire. Some called him a traitor, others a visionary. All I knew was that his appearance couldn't be coincidence. "We'll take that exit, General," I replied, "if you're offering. Transmitting coordinates now. Make for the dark side of the smaller moon. And Captain, better hurry. Those royal ships don't look in a negotiating mood." I adjusted course, pushing our damaged vessel to its limits. The warships followed energy weapons slicing through space around us. "They're jamming our sensors," Celine reported, her hands dancing across the controls. "I can't see what's waiting at those coordinates." "Then we trust," I said simply, "or we die here." As we rounded the cratered surface of Valar Prime's smaller moon, our visual scanners picked up nothing. Empty space. "So much for the legendary General Kane," I muttered, preparing for a last stand. Celine touched my arm. "Wait, look at the gravitational readings." She was right. Something was distorting local space. Something massive. A massive battlecruiser decloaked directly ahead, its hangar bay open like a welcoming maw. The Defiance, Kane's flagship, thought destroyed in the Antares conflict years earlier. "Is that what I think it is?" Celine whispered, eyes wide. The Defiance. I couldn't keep the awe from my voice. "They said Kane went down with his ship when the Valari fleet cornered him at Antares 4. Your Earth intelligence has always been optimistic." Celine managed a smile despite the stress. "Let's hope he's as good as the legends say." We didn't hesitate, adjusting course directly for the open hangar bay. Behind us, the royal warships opened fire, their energy weapons leaving ionized trails through the void. The Defiance remained immobile, its shields absorbing the assault with minimal strain. "They're not returning fire," Celine noted as we approached the hangar. "Because they don't need to," I replied, watching as the massive ship's point defense systems activated, creating a corridor of safety for our approach. As the Eclipse settled onto the deck of Kane's ship, the Defiance, I finally allowed myself to breathe. Celine's hand found mine, squeezing tightly. The stress of our escape etched temporary lines around her eyes, but her luminescence remained vibrant, pulsing in harmony with our unborn child. "Are you okay?" I asked, powering down the ship's systems. She nodded. Better than okay. For the first time in my life, I'm truly free." The hangar doors closed behind us as the Defiance jumped to faster than light, leaving Valar Prime and its pursuit ships far behind. The sudden acceleration pushed us back into our seats despite the ship's inertial dampeners. "Military-grade FTL," I muttered appreciatively. "Not the neutered civilian tech Earth gets from the Valari." "Another of my father's many lies," Celine said bitterly. "Keeping the best advancements for our people while giving humans just enough to keep them dependent." Before I could respond, a squad of armed personnel surrounded our ship, a mix of humans and, surprisingly, Valari. Their uniforms bore no insignia of Earth or the Empire, just a simple diamond-shaped patch with a stylized galaxy at its center. General Kane was waiting for us when we disembarked a towering figure with a scarred face and eyes that had seen too much war. His left arm was a cybernetic replacement gleaming with Valari tech integrated with human design, a physical manifestation of the cooperation he represented. Captain Vance, he nodded to me, then looked at Celine with undisguised interest. And Princess Valus, you two have caused quite the diplomatic incident. Celine stepped forward regal, despite her travel-worn appearance and the slight bulge of her pregnancy. General Kane, we appreciate your intervention, but why risk conflict with the Valari Empire for us? The old general's face broke into a surprising smile, softening his battle-hardened features. Because, Your Highness, you are not the only ones who believe humans and Valari could be stronger together than apart. With a gesture toward the hangar exit, he added, and I think there's something you both should see. He led us through the Defiance, a ship I'd only ever heard about in classified briefings. The corridors were wider than standard Earth vessels, the lighting a perfect blend of human practicality and Valari aesthetics. But what struck me most were the crew humans and Valari working side by side without the strict segregation enforced throughout the Empire. Not just working together, but interacting as equals, sharing meals, laughing at jokes, touching without hesitation. It was like walking into an alternate reality, one where the carefully maintained divisions between our species had never existed. We arrived at what appeared to be a command center, but unlike any military setup I'd seen before. The hierarchical structure I was accustomed to was replaced by collaborative workstations. Tactical displays showed multiple star systems with coded markings I didn't recognize. Welcome, Kane said with unmistakable pride, to the Coalition. The Coalition, I repeated, trying to process what I was seeing. A Valari officer approached her luminescence, moderate but stable, her uniform a hybrid of styles. The Interspecies Coalition for Mutual Progress. She explained, her accent almost imperceptible. We've been operating in the shadows for nearly a decade, building a network across both human and Valari territories. Commander Lyra Nex, Kane introduced her. My second in command and one of our founders. Celine's eyes widened in recognition. House Nex was purged 5 years ago. My father claimed they were traitors who attempted to assassinate him. Commander Nex's expression tightened. The only treason my family committed was suggesting that humans be given equal status in diplomatic negotiations. The assassination plot was fabricated to justify eliminating voices of moderation in the royal court. For the next few weeks, we learned about this hidden network of progressive Valari nobles and human independence, working toward a genuine alliance, not the one-sided partnership that currently existed. They had been watching us, Kane explained, hoping our unique relationship might spark something larger. When we detected unusual energy signatures from your quarters in the palace, Commander Nex told us over dinner one evening, we suspected something unprecedented was happening. You were monitoring us, I asked, unsure whether to be impressed or disturbed. We monitor everything inside the palace, she replied unapologetically. It's how we've stayed one step ahead of the purges. But your energy signatures were unique, unlike anything in our records. Celine placed a protective hand over her growing belly. Our child, Kane nodded. We have a theory about that, which is why we'd like you to meet Dr. Elias Chen. Dr. Chen was a brilliant xenogeneticist, formerly of Earth's premier research institute, until he published a paper suggesting that humans and Valari shared a distant evolutionary ancestor. He'd been discredited, his research confiscated, and had barely escaped an accident that claimed the lives of his research team. The Coalition had rescued him, providing the resources to continue his forbidden research away from the Empire's watchful eyes. Your child, Dr. Chen told us during Celine's examination, eyes alight with scientific fascination, is developing extraordinary abilities. The combination of human adaptability and Valari energy manipulation is unprecedented. Under a specialized scanner, we could see our baby's developing form, unmistakably a blend of human and Valari characteristics, and surrounding it a field of energy that pulsed in time with both Celine's luminescence and, surprisingly, my own bioelectrical signature. The child is creating a harmonic resonance between your biological systems, Dr. Chen explained. In effect, it's synchronizing you both at a fundamental level. That explained the strange phenomena we'd experienced, my skin temporarily taking on Valari luminescence, Celine developing increased physical endurance typical of humans. Is the baby healthy? Celine had asked, the worry of any expectant mother overriding scientific curiosity. Dr. Chen smiled reassuringly. Perfectly. In fact, its hybrid nature seems to convey certain advantages. Accelerated development, enhanced energy processing, potentially increased lifespan. I squeezed Celine's hand. So our child isn't just possible, it's thriving. More than thriving, Dr. Chen said, his expression turning serious. If my readings are correct, your child represents the next evolutionary step for both our species. A true synthesis of our strongest traits without the weaknesses of either. The implications were staggering. No wonder the Velari monarchy had worked so hard to keep our species separated to propagate myths of incompatibility. A truly integrated future would mean the end of their carefully constructed hierarchy. Our brief moment of safety was shattered when news reached us from Velar Prime. King Zephyros had declared us traitors and mobilized the Velari military on a scale not seen in generations. Publicly, he claimed it was to rescue his kidnapped daughter from human terrorists. In reality, our sources told us he was preparing to crush the coalition and any hope of true human-Velari integration. He's using your escape as pretext to crack down on progressives throughout the Empire, explained a coalition intelligence officer displaying intercepted communications. And he's pressuring Earth's government to denounce Captain Vance as a rogue operative. Earth will fold, I said grimly. They always do when the Velari apply pressure. Well, he fears what your child represents, said a surprising new ally who entered the briefing room. Princess Alira, Celine's younger sister, who had secretly joined the coalition months ago. A future where Velari aren't inherently superior. Celine rushed to embrace her sister, tears of joy streaming down her face, creating iridescent tracks on her skin. Alira, I thought you were still at the Celestial Academy. I was, the younger princess replied, returning the embrace with equal fervor. Until father began using me as a replacement for you in his political games. When I refused to denounce you publicly, I became suspect as well. Alira was younger than Celine by several years, her luminescence brighter but less controlled, a trait of Velari youth. Where Celine was thoughtful and measured, Alira had always been impulsive and direct. That she had managed to escape the palace's surveillance spoke to her resourcefulness. The coalition extracted me 3 days ago, she explained. Father doesn't know I'm gone yet. My handmaidens are using a holographic projector to simulate my presence in my quarters. She turned to me, violet eyes so similar to her sister's appraising. So you're the human who stole my sister's heart and gave her something far more valuable in return. I felt myself flush under her scrutiny. It wasn't exactly planned. Alira laughed, a melodic sound that reminded me of Celine's. The best revolutions never are, Captain Vance. Celine's pregnancy advanced rapidly, another unexpected aspect of our cross-species child. Where a normal Velari gestation lasted nearly a standard Earth year, in human pregnancies, 9 months our child was developing at an accelerated rate that Dr. Chen estimated would result in birth after only 7 months. As her belly grew larger, so did the king's rage. Reports came in of Velari dissidents being arrested, human settlements inspected, with increasing hostility and coalition sympathizers disappearing in the night. He's becoming desperate, General Kane observed during a strategy session, breaking centuries of diplomatic protocol with these aggressive moves. Desperation makes him dangerous, Commander next countered. He's consolidating power, bringing loyal military units back from the frontier. On the tactical display showed movement of Velari warships throughout the system, a massive redistribution of forces that left outlying territories vulnerable while strengthening the core worlds. What's he planning? I asked, studying the patterns. Based on these deployments, Kane's tactical officer explained, he's preparing for either a major internal conflict or a preemptive strike against suspected coalition bases. Alira finished, her expression grim. Including this one. The revelation sent ripples of concern through the command staff. The defiance was powerful, but it couldn't stand against the concentrated Velari fleet action. We need to evacuate, Commander next suggested. Move our personnel to the backup facilities in the outer reach. Running will only delay the inevitable, I said, frustrated, and confirms our weakness in the eyes of potential allies. Celine, who had been quietly observing the discussion, finally spoke. We can't just hide and wait, she agreed, her hand resting on her swollen belly. The longer we do nothing, the stronger my father's position becomes. General Kane fixed his weathered gaze on me. What do you propose, Captain? I took a deep breath, knowing my next words would either sound brilliant or suicidal. We take the fight to him, Not with ships and weapons we'd lose that battle, but with information, with truth. The general's scarred eyebrow raised slightly. Go on. I laid out a plan so audacious it bordered on suicide, a tactical strike at the heart of Valari power, the living core, the semi-sentient energy matrix that powered their most advanced technology and served as the central hub for all Imperial communications. The core responds to royal DNA, Celine explained, pointing to schematics smuggled out by Alira. With my access and Alira's current credentials, we could temporarily destabilize it just enough to demonstrate that the king's control isn't absolute. And while we have control, Bao, I continued, we broadcast the truth about human Valari compatibility, about the coalition, about our child. We show everyone the future that's possible if we work together. Kane's eyes narrowed, his decades of military experience calculating risks and possibilities. You're talking about giving the people hope. Dangerous game, that. More dangerous than waiting for him to find us, I countered. The core is sacred to my people, Commander Nex cautioned, a symbol of our cultural and technological achievements. Tampering with it could alienate moderate Valari we need as allies. We're not destroying it, Celine emphasized. We're releasing its true potential, showing that it can embrace both our species, not just preserve artificial Valari superiority. A heavy silence fell over the room as the coalition leadership considered the proposal. Finally, Kane spoke. It's high risk, he acknowledged, but high reward. And frankly, we're running out of options. He turned to us, tactical staff. Begin preparations. I want infiltration scenarios, security assessments, and extraction plans within 12 hours. As the command staff dispersed to their duties, Alira approached us, her young face set with determination. I'll need to return to the palace, she said. My access codes are essential for this plan. Celine grabbed her sister's arm. It's too dangerous. Father will be watching for any unusual behavior. Alira gave her a confident smile. Dear sister, who do you think has been feeding the coalition information all these months? I've become quite good at deceiving our father. 3 days later, our strike team infiltrated the subterranean chambers beneath the crystal towers. Princess Alira had arranged a diversion, a false sighting of Celine and me, on a distant moon that drew away much of the palace security. Meanwhile, she had returned to her royal duties, positioning herself to grant us access at the critical moment. Our team was small but elite. General Kane himself, Commander Snexayes, myself as Celine. Despite my protests about her condition, and 3 of the coalition's best operatives, 2 human, 1 Valari. We wore modified stealth suits that masked both heat signatures and, for the Valari among us, natural luminescence. The underground passages leading to the core were ancient, predating even the Valari Empire itself, if the architectural styles were any indication. Massive crystal columns supported vaulted ceilings carved with symbols even Celine didn't recognize. The official history says the first emperors built these chambers, Celine whispered as we moved through the shadowed corridors. But they're clearly much older. Another imperial lie, I suggested, scanning for security measures. Or a truth they themselves have forgotten, Commander Nex replied. We encountered minimal resistance. Most of the conventional security forces had been deployed to chase the false lead Alira had provided. The few guards we did encounter were quickly neutralized with non-lethal methods. This wasn't about starting a war, it was about revealing a truth. As we approached the core chamber, Celine suddenly doubled over, gasping in pain. I was at her side instantly, panic rising in my throat. What's wrong? I asked, supporting her weight as she leaned heavily against me. The baby, she whispered, her luminescence fluctuating wildly. It's responding to the core somehow. I can feel it, reaching out. Before I could process what that meant, alarms blared throughout the facility. Pulsing red lights bathed the crystal corridors in an ominous glow. We've been compromised, Kane announced, checking his tactical display. Palace security is converging on our position. How? Commander Nex demanded. The diversion should have held their attention for at least another hour. A royal guard's voice echoed through the facility's communication system. Attention intruders. By order of King Zephyros, surrender immediately. The core chamber has been sealed. There is no escape. General Kane made a split-second assessment. Change of plans. Next, take the team and secure our exit route. I'll stay with the captain and the princess. Sir, Commander Nex began to protest. That's an order, Commander. Kane cut her off. Someone has to make it back to report what happens here today. As the team reluctantly departed, Kane turned to us. "Get to the core," he ordered, unslinging his pulse rifle. "I'll hold them here as long as I can." I wanted to argue, but there was no time. Supporting Celine, who seemed to be recovering from her momentary pain, I rushed toward the massive doors that sealed off the living core from the rest of the facility. "It's locked down," Celine said, examining the control panel. "Security override in effect." "Can you bypass it?" I asked. She gave me a determined look. "I'm still royal, aren't I?" Placing her palm against the scanner, she spoke clearly, despite her lingering discomfort. "Celine Velas, Royal Authentication Theta 97, Emergency Protocol Override." For a heart-stopping moment, nothing happened. Then, with a resonant tone that vibrated through our bodies, the massive crystal doors began to slide open. The chamber beyond defied description, a vast circular space at least 100 meters in diameter, with a ceiling that seemed to open directly into space itself, though we had to be hundreds of meters underground. At the center, suspended in midair, pulsed a swirling mass of energy, neither liquid nor gas. The living core, the heart of Valari technology, philosophy, and power. Colors I couldn't name moved through its ever-shifting form, while arcs of energy occasionally reached out to touch the chamber walls, leaving glowing patterns that slowly faded. The air itself seemed charged, making the hair on my arms stand on end. But we weren't alone. "I knew you would come," said a familiar voice as a figure stepped from behind the core. King Zephyros himself, without his usual royal guard or ceremonial armor. Predictable even for a human. But he looked different, his normally iridescent skin now pulsing with the same energy as the core itself. Veins of light traced patterns across his face, his eyes glowing with unnatural power. He moved with a fluidity that seemed almost incorporeal, as if he were partially made of the same energy that constituted the core. "Father," Celine gasped, her hands instinctively moving to protect her unborn child. "So, what have you done?" "I have merged with the core," he said, voice resonating strangely, creating harmonics that hurt my ears. "Become one with the purest expression of Valari greatness, something your half-breed abomination will never experience." I stepped in front of Celine protectively, my armor powering up to full capacity. "You're insane," the king, if he could still be called that, laughed, the sound rippling through the energy field around him. "Insane I am evolved, Captain Vance. The final stage of Valari development that our ancestors only theorized. The physical and energetic forms combined into transcendent being." "That's not evolution," Celine argued. "It's corruption. The core wasn't meant to be used this way." "Oh, you know nothing of the core's purpose," Zephyros snarled. "You who would dilute our royal bloodline with human weakness." He raised a hand and pure energy lashed out like a whip, throwing me against the chamber wall with incredible force. My armor absorbed most of the impact, distributing the energy across its systems, but warning lights flashed across my HUD. Another hit like that would overload the protective circuits. "You see, daughter," Zephyros taunted as I struggled to my feet. "Human technology, primitive, fragile, just like their bodies and their minds." Celine stood her ground, her luminescence intensifying with anger and determination. "Humans adapt, Father. They learn, they grow. When have the Valari truly changed? In 1,000 years, we've been stagnant, clinging to myths of superiority while refusing to evolve." "Silence," the king roared, his form becoming less distinct as his rage grew. "The core is meant to preserve our purity, a purpose I will fulfill by erasing your mistake." Another energy blast, this one aimed directly at Celine's stomach. I lunged, trying to intercept it with my armor, but I wasn't fast enough. The distance was too great, the energy too quick. I didn't need to be fast enough. The energy stopped midair, hovering before Celine's outstretched hand like a frozen lightning bolt. Her eyes had taken on the same glow as the core, but different, somehow warmer, more controlled, more human. "Impossible," whispered Zephyros, genuine fear creeping into his voice for the first time. "No, Father," Celine said, her voice overlapping with another younger tone, our unborn child somehow speaking through her. "Not impossible, inevitable." What happened next defies explanation. Celine, guided by our child, connected with the core on a level even Zephyros couldn't match. The suspended energy began to flow toward her, around her, through her, creating patterns of incredible complexity. The chamber filled with blinding light, as two versions of the future battled for dominance. Zephyros fought back, drawing more power from the core, his form becoming increasingly unstable as he channeled more energy than any Valari was meant to contain. The chamber itself began to shake, crystal fragments falling from the ceiling. I could only watch useless as Selene fought not just for our lives, but for a new vision of what could be. Human weapons and training meant nothing in this clash of energies and ideologies. This was Selene's battle and our child's. A piercing tone cut through the chaos, rising in pitch until it became almost unbearable. The core itself was resonating, vibrating at a frequency that made the very air shimmer. The patterns of energy flowing through Selene began to replicate throughout the chamber, creating a tapestry of light that told a story, our story, and countless others like it. Humans and Valari together stronger than either alone. Zephyros screamed as the core rejected his corruption, pulling back the energy he'd stolen. His form flickered, solidifying back into his physical body as the unnatural power drained away. When the light faded and my vision cleared, King Zephyros lay unconscious on the chamber floor, the unnatural energy drained from his body. Selene stood triumphant, still glowing faintly, her hands cradling her belly. "We didn't kill him," she said softly, looking down at her father with complex emotions playing across her face. "That was important. Death creates martyrs. He needs to live to see the world change." General Kane and the remainder of our strike team burst into the chamber, weapons ready only to find the battle already won. Kane took in the scene, the unconscious king, the now calm core, and Selene's glowing form with stunned amazement. "What happened?" he demanded, looking between Selene, me, and the fallen king. I shook my head, still trying to process it myself. The future happened. Using the core's communication capabilities, we broadcast the truth throughout the Empire and to Earth, unfiltered by propaganda ministries or diplomatic niceties. The recording of Zephyros attempting to kill his own daughter and unborn grandchild shocked even his most loyal supporters. More importantly, we released Dr. Chen's research on human Valari compatibility, complete with evidence too compelling to dismiss. The aftermath was chaos, the beautiful kind. With recordings of the king's madness and attempted murder of his own daughter broadcast throughout the Empire, popular opinion shifted virtually overnight. Progressive factions long forced underground emerged to voice their support for a new approach. Human governments, seeing the possibility of true partnership rather than subservience, began backing the coalition openly. Princess Alira, as the loyal daughter who had never officially defected, assumed temporary leadership, while a new council formed humans and Valari together. Her youth and inexperience were balanced by her genuine commitment to change and her willingness to listen to advisors from both species. Zephyros wasn't executed despite calls for his head. Instead, at Selene's insistence, he was exiled to a remote monitoring station at the edge of Valari space, a living reminder of the dangers of clinging to the past. Without his connection to the core, he was just an ordinary Valari male stripped of the powers he'd abused for so long. "He'll have time to reflect," Selene told me when I questioned her mercy. "To see the new world we're building, perhaps someday he'll understand." 1 month later, our son was born, the first officially recognized hybrid heir between humans and Valari. We named him Leo after the Earth constellation visible from Selene's palace window when we first acknowledged our feelings for each other. His skin had the subtle shimmer of the Valari white, but his eyes were unmistakably human, curious, expressive, alive with possibility. And when he cried, well, the lights in the medical bay flickered in response, a reminder of the unique energetic abilities he'd inherited from both bloodlines. "He's perfect," Selene whispered, cradling him against her chest as her luminescence synchronized with his natural glow. "He's the beginning," I replied, overwhelmed by emotions I'd never expected to feel, of something bigger than all of us. The next months were a whirlwind of activity as the coalition transitioned from underground movement to legitimate political force. Selene and I found ourselves reluctant symbols of the integration movement, our family representing what was possible when artificial barriers fell away. The opposition didn't disappear overnight, of course. Traditionalists on both sides viewed our union, and especially our child, with suspicion or outright hostility. There were assassination attempts, propaganda campaigns, terrorist attacks against integrated communities. But for every act of heart, there were a dozen acts of solidarity. Today, on what would have been the traditional Valari coronation day, a ceremony unchanged for millennia, Selene and I stand before a gathered crowd of humans and Valari in the great plaza beneath the crystal towers. Our son, now 3 months old, rests in Selene's arms, occasionally disrupting the proceedings with bursts of infant energy that make the ceremonial lights dance and pulse. The podium where generations of Valari monarchs declared their absolute authority has been replaced by a simple platform, accessible from all sides. The ancient orb of dominion, traditionally used to symbolize the monarch's power over all lesser beings, has been repurposed as the foundation for a new monument, the sphere of unity, with intertwining strands representing all species within the former empire. Today marks not the crowning of a new monarch. Selene addresses the crowd, her voice carried to the farthest reaches of the plaza without technological assistance, another gift from our unique child's presence. But the beginning of a new understanding, not ruler and subject, not Valari and human, but partners in creating something greater than either could achieve alone. I step forward, my hand resting lightly on Selene's shoulder. I'm no longer Captain Vance of Earth Special Forces or the Royal Guardian Corps, but simply Ethan, father, partner, bridge between worlds. For generations, I tell the assembled dignitaries, feeling the weight of history and possibility, both our species believe strength came from isolation and purity. We were wrong. True strength is found not in purity, but in connection. As if in agreement, our son gives a happy gurgle, and a small shower of light particles dances above the crowd, drawing gasps of wonder and delight from humans and Valari alike. The path ahead won't be easy. Selene continues, her expression serious but hopeful. We have centuries of separation to overcome, prejudices to dismantle, new ways of being to discover together. But we will walk that path together, I add, step by step, day by day, not as perfect beings, but as people willing to try to learn to grow beyond what we've been. Princess Alira joins us on the platform, along with General Kane Commander Nex and representatives from a dozen worlds. Together we activate the sphere of unity, which rises into the air, pulsing with the same harmonic energy that flows between Selene Lao and myself. To the future, Alira declares, raising her hands toward the sphere, not mine to command, but ours to build. The crowd's response is thunderous applause, cheers, the peculiar harmonic humming that is the Valari equivalent of approval. For this moment at least, we are truly one people, united in hope. The path ahead won't be easy. Old prejudices die hard, and there are factions on both sides that view our family, our coalition, as abominations that threaten their power and privilege. But for every opposer, there are two supporters, people tired of artificial divisions, ready to explore what we can become together. As we leave the platform, moving through the crowd that parts respectfully before us, I lean close to Selene. Did we do the right thing? I ask quietly, the weight of responsibility still heavy on my shoulders. She looks at our son, then at the integrated crowd around us and smiles. We did the necessary thing, and the rest is up to him and all the children who will come after. This isn't just our story, it's the beginning of a new chapter for both our worlds. A reminder that sometimes the most revolutionary act is simply to love beyond the boundaries others have set for us. Hey, if you enjoyed this story of interspecies, romance, and rebellion, make sure to hit that subscribe button for more mind-bending tales from across the universe. Drop a comment below. What would you do if you found yourself in Captain Vance's position? Would you fight for love across the stars? Let me know, and until next time, keep your eyes on the horizon and maybe the skies above.